Difficult conversations are inevitable. At work, at home, in the church, there will come a moment when you need to speak a hard truth, challenge a bad decision, or correct someone in love. And in that moment, how you speak will make all the difference. Too often, we avoid these conversations, fearing conflict, rejection, or awkwardness. Or worse, we rush in carelessly, speaking without wisdom, doing more harm than good. But Christ calls us to something better. He calls us to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers. He calls us to truth, spoken in love, to words that sharpen, encourage, and, when necessary, rebuke. So, how do you do it? How do you have hard conversations like a Christian? That's what this episode is about. To turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ, we will have to master this skill. So, let's dive in. Welcome to the 17:6 podcast, where we help you turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ. I'm Trevor.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Zach.
And that's Amos. I'm going to switch the camera in the middle of the intro. Mize.
Yes.
It's a long middle name.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, that's all I had.
My birth certificate is double-sided.
You know what I was thinking about before we started recording is we typically record multiple episodes back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And it's a little difficult to come up with witty banter
it is.
after we used all of our witty banter for the
Last
first episode.
episode.
Yeah. Unless something silly happens between the two episodes, like someone stepping outside for a moment and coming back in.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be interesting to talk about.
Yeah. But we'll keep moving. I'm sure, so we can pass them the witty banter. I'm sure you have a joke that people think is funny.
Yeah. Zach, other than being extinct, why can't you hear pterodactyls going to the bathroom?
Oh, I know this one, but I'm not going to say it.
I
It's
don't
actually
know.
a good joke. Good job.
Because the P is silent.
Oh, that's funny.
Good job.
That's good. Have you guys seen that book? It's like, I forgot the name of it, but something like the worst alphabet book ever. And it's like, P is for pterodactyl.
I love that idea. I need to find this book and then I'll teach my kids.
Do you have another? Well, yeah. What's another letter other than pterodactyl? You don't have an example off the top? Okay.
Knife.
I didn't
Knife.
get the book.
K is for knife.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
Knife.
Yeah, the knife.
O is for possum.
Perfect.
I got to get that book.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Maybe give me become a sponsor of the episode.
yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Unless they're not believers and they probably would not want to sponsor.
Oh,
it.
yeah, that's true.
But who knows? We'll reach out. We'll reach out. Or if you watch this episode, publisher, creator of that book, reach out. info@the176podcast.com.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Well, let's dive into this episode. How to have hard conversations like a Christian.
Yeah.
So you came up with this. Like,
Well, what it was I had a difficult conversation with a person while another person was present. This is at work. And after the conversation, the guy was like, dude, Zach, how do you do that? And I started giving him a list of like, well, if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, these are the things that I would keep in mind. And then we had an outline for a podcast. And I was like, I don't want to waste that conversation. You might as well two birds with one stone, right?
I think it's great. I think it's great because Caleb and I were talking to you beforehand. We're like, man, we haven't been in a place in our life to have a hard conversation, but we were just attributing it to work because we understood like that's where you're coming from.
Right.
But the realization is this episode is applicable for all of our lives.
Yep.
For like family, hard conversations with family, maybe a wife or maybe a child or maybe a cousin or an uncle, whatever. Maybe it could be at work. It could be somebody at church. Like this is a good thought process to go to and an understanding to go through to have those hard conversations.
Sure.
And I think it'll be good to have, as we get into the conversation, to have we will all have different perspectives on
Absolutely.
this. With Zach, management, Trevor being an employer,
Yeah.
and then me just being an employee or, neither one of those things.
Yeah. But again,
Wait, you're saying you don't have a job?
Employee, I guess.
but the best parents are going to be taking these principles and applying
Right.
these to all the difficult conversations you have with your children.
I think
And you're having
that's
these
it.
conversations multiple times a week. So this is a very, very practical guide on how to have those conversations.
And I see that's where the world being turned upside down the most happens. Like our conversations with our kids, maybe I said that incorrectly, but that's where we can apply this the most, and we're going to see the most impact on. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it, even though I haven't really read over the notes. So this is, I mean, I glanced at them and I apologize, but here we go. I'm going to let Zach lead this because it's his episode. It's his baby. Here we go.
That's an overstatement. But so first off, let me go ahead and just say that someone who has been really helpful for me is John Maxwell. He has a book. I read The 5 Levels of Leadership, and he has what he calls a candid caring checklist, which is basically like a checklist that makes sure that when you're about to have a conversation with somebody, that you are coming at it from the right framework, I guess. And the owner of where I work was so bought into this checklist that he made everyone like a little card that can fit in your wallet. So every time you're about to have a conversation with somebody, you whip that thing out and you go through the checklist to make sure you're going into this conversation the right way. So if you've read that book or you know John Maxwell and you're like, man, this sounds really familiar, I am ripping off him shamelessly. Awesome. So the first thing before you go into a conversation is you really have to consider, is this really the problem? Like, is it really their problem or is it your problem? Because a lot of times it's like, man, they're just not doing things the way that I would want them to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So if your kid is, doing something that is very kiddish and it's appropriate, but it's just, you are in a bad mood, you have to kind of think through that first.
I think that's a good point, because we're going to come at having a conversation, or it would be out of a reaction. So our emotions are going to be high. So it sounds like, check yourself. Is this really your problem? That's the first one. So take some time before you actually confront the person.
Right,
this isn't always an immediate reaction to something. Now, sometimes I'm assuming there is an immediate reaction that needs to happen. But if you're going to have a hard conversation with your child or team member or manager, however that looks, or somebody at church, like take some time and think through it. That's what it sounds like. Use wisdom to think through
it. Matthew chapter 7, every nominal Christian's favorite verse, don't judge, right? But there really is a sense in which, like, you got to make sure there's not a log in your own eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this problem the fact that you didn't get enough sleep last night, or is it because they're actually acting inappropriately?
So a question I had in this is there a certain length of time that is too long to check yourself?
Man, that's a really good really good question. I think it kind of depends on the urgency of the situation.
Yeah.
Your kids playing out in the middle of the road, you probably don't have a whole lot of time to think through that.
Right. 4 quadrants: important and urgent, or just urgent and not important.
Yeah. There are times
not urgent.
Yeah. Queen Esther trying to have a difficult conversation with the king was one of those things like, oh, this has got to happen pretty fast. Like,
at least before the 6th of October, because that's when everyone's going to get slaughtered. I don't know if that's the date. I just made that date up. So please don't check. Yeah.
Say, wow, that's some insight.
None. No.
So that'd be the first step. Make sure you really do need to have this conversation, that it's not just because you're cranky or something like that.
That's great.
That's good.
All right. Second one. Okay. This can't not come up in every episode, right?
Right.
So
Sunday school
answer, prayer and Jesus, right? You got to pray.
Yeah.
Again, we just talked about this in the last episode, but I'm going to keep just ringing this bell. But James 1:5, does any of you lack wisdom? Let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. Depending on the time frame, it may be like a quick Nehemiah style, 10-second prayer under your breath.
Yes.
Or if it's a really serious conversation where you can actually like take time to do it, like, get on your knees and plead with the Lord to give you the wisdom for the conversation. I'm thinking like, your family member is lost and you want to really confront them with the gospel or something like that. But definitely bring the Lord in on it so he can guide you and help you out.
Was it on purpose that the last episode was about wisdom and this one is about having conversations?
This is all the Lord's providence.
Yeah, okay. This was decided at like 6:15 this morning.
Yeah.
So perfect.
Oh, that's great.
Because the two it does go hand in hand. You have to be wise in your difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we know the Lord's sovereign because we're Calvinists, and I'm throwing that in there for anybody that's missed the Calvinist reference.
Yeah. So somehow we managed to have a podcast on difficult conversations and still get Calvinism in there.
Yeah. Perfect. We're there.
Yep. All right. Number 3 is, as you're approaching it, you want to assume the best of the person. So 1 Corinthians 13:7, love hopes all things. If you're going into the conversation and you're assuming that they are lazy, evil, stupid, incompetent, whatever it is, then that is going to frame and shape how the conversation is taking place. So instead, as I have a difficult conversation with my kid, I almost always will start off with, hey, I know you have a good heart, but this was an inappropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
Or if I'm having a conversation with a guy at work, hey, I know you're a hard worker, but this is not what we're wanting. This is not the result we're wanting to get out of this.
It's really hard to assume the best of that person you're about ready to have a hard conversation with, especially if your views are completely different. Thinking about a family member, having that hard conversation with a family member, maybe their political views are different. Really hard because that's tension.
So let's take that their political views are different. Okay. Yeah. So let's go ahead and assume that the reason that they are, let's say, their views on immigration is different. What is driving them to have that view? It's probably not just I hate people or I hate the Bible, or maybe it is, but most frequently it's, hey, I really appreciate the compassion you have on this people group or whatever it is. If you can approach the conversation with that in mind, it's going to shape the conversation quite a bit in a positive direction.
This is crazy that I even remember this reference, but the vice presidential debate, the only one that happened, JD Vance said something pretty amazing. He looked at Tim Walz. He's like, I realize that the way when you're coming to these opinions you have, you're not coming from malice or hate. Like, you truly mean that you're doing the best you can from where you're at. Like, he got on that level. Like, he assumed the best out of his opponent. He's like, you're coming at it from love. I disagree with how you're coming from it. Like these positions you have, which was amazing. So anyway, that was totally random. I don't know why I remember that, but yeah.
Extremely difficult to do whenever it is someone who has such a strong differing opinion than you. Is to not think that they're coming at it from an evil standpoint.
Right? So kind of if someone's going to have a difficult conversation with us, we have this patriarchal view of men and women, right? So someone who is wanting to confront us on, hey, I hate your guys' views on men and women. If you come to us without the presupposition that we hate women, that would be the way to make a difficult conversation really bad. It's like, man, these guys just, they have a, ancient view that, we've progressed beyond, that's going to make a difficult conversation even worse.
Right.
So, all right, next thing, you want to focus on the outcome. So if you think back to when you were a kid and you were anticipating Christmas, the feeling, this point that I'm getting at right now has more to do with like the emotional preparation for the conversation. When you were preparing for Christmas as a kid, the anticipation was probably stronger emotionally than the actual day of. So you probably felt a lot of tension coming up on December 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and then it was, released on the 25th. And it's the same thing, but in reverse with difficult conversations, where the lead up to the difficult conversation is actually stronger emotionally than the difficult conversation itself.
Okay.
So manage your anticipation to know that this feeling is going to be stronger now, which is another reason why I would suggest doing it quicker rather than delaying it.
Right.
There's a wise delay so you can think through things, but there's also a putting it off so you don't have to deal with it. And that actually just makes it worse for you because of that pent up emotion as you're preparing for it.
I would also imagine that you would lose that, not the urgency, but the importance of it. Like, if you've kind of delayed this hard conversation, what is truly important, you kind of lose that. We were talking before the show, like, man, we need to do this episode now because I'm losing, my excitement for it. So, so that has to come into play. So sorry, just about the time frame. I think that's a good point.
So when it comes to the time frame, in my experience, most people put it off too long.
Yeah.
Okay. You're always going to find someone who, in some situations, they will give wise advice, but they're always going to say, why don't you just sleep on it? That is way more common and way more misused, I think, than the reverse. Typically, people need a kick to go actually do the conversation rather than like hey, why don't you hold off on that?
Well, I think a lot of it is the anxiety of having that conversation, right? It's like you dread having that conversation, so you put it off, and then it becomes less important.
Right.
But if you focus on the outcome, hopefully less anxiety. It'll help. It'll help
for sure. Kind of like what Hebrews 12 talks about, like all discipline in the moment is unpleasant, but we're looking for what it actually produces, right?
Yes,
the result.
Absolutely.
All right. Fifth thing, you want to be resolved to find the best outcome for them. So not to be confused with the easiest outcome for them. So Proverbs 27:6, faithful are the wounds of a friend. You want to be thinking about what will be the result of this. You want to be focusing on that. That way, as you're navigating the conversation, if you have that end in mind, it'll help tell you what true north is.
I mean, how many times have I disciplined or got onto my kids and not thought about the outcome? Like having that outcome in mind makes it so much, be resolved to find the best outcome for them. Like it's a reaction sometimes. Like they do something dumb and like you're just on them without trying to really tell them why that's dumb and why you want them to change,
Yep.
So that's good.
Every difficult conversation for the most part is going to be more complex once you get in it that you hadn't prepared for. There's, this is going on too. And if you have what true north is, that'll help guide those complexities. Yeah. Oh, get off over here. But this little side quest that we're talking about really doesn't matter to what we're trying to get out of this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Number 6, this goes into body language. Typically, not all the time, typically, if you can be smiling when you're doing this, not in again, kind of depends on the conversation, but it actually shapes the tone and can make this situation that would be really awkward and really, gross. Mm-hmm. It can actually make it a lot better. I can think of multiple difficult conversations I've had where just because the person was in a grumpy, their face was grumpy looking, it made the conversation, that much more difficult. And again, this is not always appropriate. If you're firing somebody, don't do it with a smile on your face.
I don't know. Sometimes you need to though, right? No, I'm joking.
Yeah. You might smile afterward, but during the conversation, don't smile. So this is just kind of a rule of thumb. A lot of times these difficult conversations, if you can approach it with with body language in mind, to where we can find what the good of the conversation is, and have your body language reflect that, it's going to be so much better for you.
That's good.
So if you are listening and you didn't see me and Trevor put on very forced smiles, don't do those. Those were pretty awkward.
Be authentic and smile.
And this, again, it's riffing off of the whole, you're thinking of the outcome, right? So you're sitting down with your kid and you could, have a big frown on your face and rebuke them super harshly, right. Or have that, hey, I know you're good, that whole conversation with a smile on your face, they're going to receive it so much better.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. As far as body language and scriptural references, you see Proverbs talks about how whoever narrows his eyes is planning deception. So Proverbs is talking about body language there.
Right.
As we were going through the book of Acts, we commented on Paul's use of body language a couple different times. So the subject of body language is something that the Bible talks about. And right on that is number 7, use non-threatening body language. Okay, so I have a really specific situation in mind where I was having a difficult conversation with somebody, and this other person, they looked like they were a predator stalking its prey. Like they're on the edge of their seat. The intense eye contact was like I could feel like they were staring right through me, like they were stalking me. So just, again, give a lot of consideration to your body language. And even though this might feel like you don't want to actually look like you're attacking the person, because then they're going to feel that way.
So, I mean, there might be times though, you need to make sure your kids know you're the alpha in the household. So maybe you need to look like the velociraptor. No, I'm joking. This is just
like this?
Yes. That exact voice. Yes. I don't know how you know how raptors sound, but that is amazing.
Like,
I've often wondered if maybe raptors quacked rather than
maybe. Son, we need to have a difficult conversation.
We've all watched Jurassic Park, Trevor.
Yeah.
That was my point.
If I went to my son and said, we need to have a difficult conversation, it may not come across as we need to have a difficult conversation.
So sometimes you need to look like prey, or the predator stalking the prey.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I'm joking with this.
No.
Yeah. So kind of on that, if you can look relaxed, kind of like leaning back, they'll probably feel more relaxed.
That's good.
I like that.
All right. Number 8. Okay. This is a game changer. If you can, again, depending on the conversation, if you can plan out the hardest line word for word, that could be super helpful.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that the more preparation you can do for this thing, the more helpful it'll be. I'm not saying you can write a manuscript for a difficult conversation, but if you get your one sentence, the one that's really going to strike, get that planned out, it's gonna be so much more difficult to actually come up with it on the spot.
This is something that I know for a fact is not talked about enough in not just hard conversations, but in other areas. Planning is essential, meaning, like, going off track just a little bit, even like for sales calls for me, like I need to plan my questions that I'm about ready to ask my potential client. You need to plan specifically, especially for these hard conversations. Don't let anybody tell you that, like, oh, you can just go in and wing it. Don't do that. If you really care about the person, like what you're presenting, you're gonna plan.
Right. So think about when the prophet Nathan is going to rebuke David. He wasn't coming up with that parable on the spot. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He had planned it out beforehand.
Yes.
Now someone might be like, oh, that makes it not feel authentic. Like,
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You care more about the person. Like, you're planning because you care about the outcome, because you care about him. You're loving your neighbor as yourself.
Well, and once again, it goes, for me personally, it goes back into that anxiety of having the hard conversation, is because if you don't plan that line word for word, or maybe not word for word, but what you were saying, word for word, is that you'll be there having the conversation and then be putting it off, and putting it off, and putting it off. And the person sitting there is like,
That's a great point.
Like, are we ever getting to the point of this conversation? And it builds that tension.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Number 9 is warn them that this conversation might sting.
Okay.
You don't want to completely just surprise them with it. And so I'm thinking of management. So, so many different ways you had to think through how to tactfully do this, but especially if it's gonna be a really, really hard conversation, you could even like, hey, can you meet me up in the office in about an hour? It's gonna be kind of a difficult conversation, but they have an hour to kind of stew on it. But that's, in my opinion, in my experience, that's better than them getting up there thinking, oh, we're just gonna have a fun conversation. That's smack.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know?
I usually tell my kids right before I spank them, like, listen, I'm gonna spank you. Run. No, don't run. Don't run.
Yeah.
So that would be coming from my point of view, or the way that I'm wired. If someone's like, we're having a difficult conversation in 1 hour, I think that may just absolutely just kill me.
Yeah. And again, it depends.
Yeah.
You need to know the person.
Yeah.
Is this person good at just, going with the punches or whatever?
Yeah.
Or would they do better to have an hour to kind of like prepare themselves?
Yeah.
So to maybe push back a little bit, maybe not push back, but just ask you is, and this goes into knowing the person, is if someone came to me with that, I would think I would immediately become unproductive for that next hour. I'm just dreading that conversation, or,
Right. Yeah.
Goodness, my mind is going a million different places. How can this?
Yeah. Again, it just depends on the person. So,
and that's the important distinction, is it depends on the person.
And I think no matter the person, though, letting them know that this is a difficult, this might sting a little bit, even at the beginning of the conversation, is the key there. So that way they'll, hey, how was your weekend? All right, man, we're so happy to hear that you had a great weekend. You're fired, by the way. But I hope this next week will be good too.
Right.
Which, in that case, I guess it doesn't matter if they're unproductive.
And this goes into your next point.
Yeah.
The way that you said that. Hey, how's it going? You're fired.
Yeah. Okay. So number 10 is say the hardest line as soon as possible. That goes back to the whole anticipation thing.
Yeah.
If you can just get it out there, I'm talking like, you invite the person, into the office, and within 30 seconds, you're saying that planned out hardest line. Depending on the situation, that typically is going to be better for them. That way you're not trying to like fill this awkward space with, kind of easing into it and that kind of thing. Just get it out there. That way this conversation is the difficult conversation.
I know that I would respect whoever is giving me this difficult conversation if it happened. They're like, listen, I'm just going to tell you the reason for this meeting. Even if they're reading it from paper, I would be even good if they preface it. This is going to sound awkward because I wrote it out because I want to get it. I want to get it across. And you just read it.
Yeah.
Like that, there's going to be more respect, more mutual respect happening.
Yep.
So how can we apply these last 2 points aside from like the workplace or with your kids?
Man.
Is it telling your child, hey, we're going to have a difficult conversation. It might sting a little bit in an hour.
Oh,
is it the same application?
So
or
I want to apply that with the child, but I'm thinking, okay, so you have
what about your spouse?
Your spouse.
Like that would be really hard. Kind of having a difficult conversation with your spouse and warning your wife ahead of time, like, hey, like I've got, like, let's have a conversation tonight about this issue.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
And that's where I think it'd be super appropriate.
Yeah.
Especially if you can, hey, I don't know, are we going to buy the new car?
Right.
Kind of give them a heads up. Hey, I want to have that conversation. I know you're not, ready for right now, but maybe in a couple hours.
Well, I mean, I think something that a lot of husbands and wives go through is budget. So setting a time to have a hard conversation about your finances and budget. Like, so I'm just thinking, like, not just buying a car, hard conversation. I mean, like, something that causes fights. How do you eliminate the fights?
Right.
And that's my thought. So time it out.
Yep. Very good. All right. Number 11 is you want to ask for their perspective. So you don't want to do this before the hard line. Okay. You want to get your cards out on the table first, but you do. And that may mean the hard line is, hey, from my perspective, you are not performing the way that you said you were going to perform, or whatever it is. Right. But then you do want to ask their perspective. And I read a very helpful book. I think it's just called Difficult Conversations. I can't remember all the authors, but they make the point that every difficult conversation actually has 3 sub conversations that are happening simultaneously. Most people, they're not thought out with, but these things are going through their head in a non-articulated way. The 3 things is what happened. What's their view on the situation? Okay. That's the surface level. But then there's 2, how do they feel about this situation? So you're getting your emotions in there. And then 3rd, how does that affect their identity? So what does that mean about them as a person? And if you can have those 3 conversations, those 3 sub conversations in your mind, because they may not disagree with what happened. They may not disagree with how they feel about what happened, but you may not be tapping into the fact that this affects their identity in such and such way. So you want to know which conversation are we having right now?
Yeah, maybe this isn't where you're going, but just affecting their identity. Like, you want them to keep their dignity. They don't want to lose their dignity. I was thinking of Dave Ramsey in his book said, like, he never, when he fires somebody, he doesn't or tell people why he fired that person. He's letting them keep their dignity no matter how terrible the firing offense is. So I'm just thinking, like, this is affecting their dignity. You're thinking about their identity, not dignity. You're thinking about their identity, right? Is that where you're going from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of it, but I guess that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Hey, I'm not saying you're a bad worker. So what you've done is you've not threatened their identity. You're still a good worker.
And then again, I would assume they're going to be more apt to listen to you at that point and accepting what you're about ready to say.
So whenever you say that, don't say but, right? I'm not saying I'm not saying you're a bad worker. Then don't say but.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So, let's see. Proverbs 18:17, one man's way seems right until another presents his case. So that's why you want to ask their perspective on what's going on. And don't lose, like, you want to make sure, depending on the conversation, that you're still leading the conversation. But you can lead the conversation through questions.
That's good.
If you're no longer leading the question, depending on the situation, you might lose the conversation. It might get so far derailed that it's no longer being helpful. So you want to try to maintain the structure and the direction of the conversation.
We've all been part of those small groups that just get derailed from the actual questions at hand.
Okay.
All right. Number 12.
Number 12. You want to provide a clear vision for what change is needed. In other words, you don't want to just say, hey, I have this massive problem. You poop on them and then you just walk out.
Solid.
Like, what is the solution to this? What are you actually trying to get out of it? What needs to change? Don't leave any guesswork there.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I think that goes, directly to talking to your kids. It's like, you did this thing wrong.
Yeah.
Now, how are we going to change it? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How are we going to change your attitude or your, whatever.
I can think of, man, this is so frequent in management conversations. We're like, hey, your numbers aren't adding up. All right, we'll see you next week. Like, that's not helpful at all.
Your numbers aren't adding up, and if they're not adding up, next quarter you're fired.
Yeah.
What? Huh?
If you are going to have a difficult conversation like this, at least be a decent enough human being to tell them how can they solve the problem.
Right. Yeah.
So number 13 is you want to express your intention. So remind them, hey, I'm just trying to help you out. I'm not trying to harm you. And if that's not really the case, then don't have the conversation.
Just real quick, applying number 12 to children, something my wife did, which was amazing. So my kids were getting angry really fast and kind of throwing tantrums more often than what we would like them to. And so, of course we would get onto them, but she had the idea to, when they weren't angry, let's make it a routine to memorize James 1:19-20 about anger. Anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So they memorized that. And then when they would get angry, like she would remind them, listen, say the verse. Like it was really good. She's like, this is how we're going to change. Like you need to know that this anger isn't the way God wants you to be. And so it was a nice way to change, to incorporate that change. So just application there. I loved it. It worked really well.
Okay. All right, number 13 was express your intention. You want to help them, not harm them. And then number 14, this is the final one. You don't want them to leave the conversation negatively assuming your intentions or your perception on it. So you may have said it at the beginning of the conversation that you were trying to help them out. In the conversation, hey, I just want to remind you, I'm doing this, because I think it'd be beneficial for you. Mm-hmm. So kind of just wrap it up with the bow that reminds them that, hey, I'm doing this out of love for you. I hope that you don't feel like I'm trying to hate on you. I'm just trying to help you out.
That's good. I know that's how my wife and I try to end our conversations with our kids once they get in trouble. It's like, listen, like mom and dad love you and care for you. This is why we're doing this for you. Right. So don't, and then, it's way better once we finish that conversation like that.
Yep.
So cool. Very cool. Is there anything else? Was that the last point?
That's all I got.
Okay, great. Hard conversations aren't just about getting your point across. They're about being faithful, about loving others enough to speak the truth, about seeking God's best for them, even when it's uncomfortable. It won't always go perfectly. Some conversations will be messy. Some will be painful. But faithfulness is not measured by how easy the road is. It's measured by obedience. And if you walk this path with wisdom, humility, and love, you will see fruit, relationships restored, clarity gained, growth, both in yourself and in those around you. So, don't shrink back. Don't let fear keep you silent. Speak with grace. Lead with wisdom. This is how we build stronger families, stronger workplaces, stronger churches. This is how we turn the world upside down, not with louder arguments, but with faithful words spoken in truth and love.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the 17:6 podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify. This is what I need to redo it. I don't know where to go from there.
See you in the next episode.
Okay.
Thanks for watching this episode.
Okay.
First.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the 17:6 podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble. And we'll see you next time.